What is going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of SCUM. This right here, as you all know, is the podcast where we dive into the deep, dark, murky waters with a plethora of legendary guests. I am, of course, your host, your bastard of ceremonies, the number one scumbag, Rex Ruger. That's REXXX. You might also know me as the King of Sleaze, a.k.a. the Hair Metal High Priest, and most importantly, of course, a.k.a. Diamond David Lee Roth Jr. Take a look, folks. And the DNA testing, almost conclusive, was just on the horn today to my attorneys, and we are working it out, and we are at the finish line. And we will prove once and for all that you are looking at the son of glam, the front man for the band. Just smoked a few grams. I got 1 million fans. I'm your ice cream man, Mr. Wop Boppa Loo Boppa Wop Bam Bam Shazam. Hot damn. Ooh. Feeling good, and of course, no doubt, looking good, as is everybody in the house, including you all out there. For me, one product gets it done for moi, and that is right there, kids. Use it. And you too may get the quaff like Roth. Probably not looking this good, but you can get damn close. Coming to you as always from the Lavender Lounge of Love. This is where it all goes down. And joined as always by the great Keith Hernandez Puppet. We are bringing you the No Frills podcast. You don't get no frills, but you do get rock star size thrills. And that's looking at the second greatest front man to ever do it. The hardest working man in show business right here. Plus, we're very technologically handicapped, if you will, over here in the SCUM camp. We don't edit. We don't do no slick tricks. We don't do nothing but give you the bare bones, so to speak. We get down to the brass tacks. And if you are watching right now, please be sure to like and subscribe to the SCUM YouTube channel, as well as follow us on Facebook. Please, people, come on, get with the program. And let me also plug my own glam sleaze metal passion project, Love Sword, which I am still looking for virtuoso level players. If you want to be the backing band behind the man, then hit me up. I know it's intimidating, and so far I've had no takers, not a one. But I get it. It's intimidating, as I said. When you're working with greatness, you don't want to pull up short. I get it. When I grace the stage, believe me, I'm larger than life. Not an easy act to follow. The old chip doesn't fall. How's that saying go? I'm a chip off the old block. The apple doesn't fall far from the proverbial tree, I should say. And that being said, at the time of this recording, I believe we've got 164 episodes up on the YouTube channel. In my opinion, all of them spectacular. There is no doubt about that. So please go on there and peruse. What else can I say? Also, we are up, I believe we're in the neighborhood of 330 some odd subscribers, which is phenomenal considering we just passed our anniversary here at SCUM, our inaugural first year doing the podcast. Which can't thank the viewers enough for watching, for supporting, for smashing that subscribe button. And I've gotten tons of great comments and great feedback, and everyone's been very complimentary on the interviews and the episodes. And that's always great to hear and see. And I am talking to my guest right now. And of course, this isn't going to be edited out because nothing is edited. Folks, I am 50 years old. I will not edit myself. And you know what? Our guest is here right now. So enough of that. We're going to get down to it and chop it up in my SCUM. Let's do this. I'm excited, but I'm always excited. What can I say?
Hey.
Look at that. We got him. See? And you were all intimidated by this whole technology thing. You know what? I'm always intimidated by it too, man. I'm 50 years old, man, and I always tell my audience, for somebody that has a podcast, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing either.
No worries. I'm actually doing. Does it sound all right?
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
All right, cool. I'm actually doing it on my phone, which is fine. I was trying to do it on a laptop, but it was my wife's.
Yeah.
But it's totally fine.
But I like what you do, though, man, because you're one of those few people that fucking really seems to fill the screen. I don't know if you have your screen turned or you just have a nice wide screen, because sometimes it doesn't look that great on a phone. You look fantastic, though.
There we go. So we worked it out.
For my audience, BRYAN HARRIS, Death Before Dishonor. First of all, seeing you, man, really makes me lament that I didn't go to Syracuse last week and see you guys with Madball. And I'm kicking myself in the ass because Brendan from Madball was going to put me on the list. And it was going to be an opportunity where he was going to, because I've had him on the show, and it was going to be a nice little segue where he was going to introduce me to Freddie, who was a guy that I would love to have on here.
For sure. Yeah, that was a cool show. Where are you out of?
I'm in upstate New York, near Syracuse. Yeah.
Cool.
First of all, man, Boston hardcore versus New York hardcore. What are the differences? Are there any?
I don't know. I mean, there's always been, I feel like half of this rivalry shit is like, I don't know, is it sports generated? I mean, I'm sure like there's some weird like 80s stuff, but I don't think there's much of a difference. I mean, sure, every city is different, right? Like, so I'm sure they got like their own thing, but a lot of these bands, we cross paths, we play there, it's good. They play here, it's good. I don't, it's all the same to me.
I like to shed it's sports related though, because that's where the real rivalry is.
Well, I feel like maybe like way back in the day, there was some like hardcore rivalry, like when it was just up and coming, when you just had like Boston, New York, DC, which, whatever, that's before my time. And then like there's a lore and a myth that goes with it. Supposedly, who knows? Right. And then you tack on the sports rivalry, which Boston and New York sports rivalry is a huge thing.
Yeah.
I don't know how that ties into hardcore, but it just ties into whatever,
So you've been doing this a long time, but I want to ask you, and I've had some other guys from hardcore bands on here too. When I think of hardcore, again, me being 50 years old, I think of the Agnostic Fronts and the Cro-Mags and the Sick of It Alls, and I think of that Lower East Side of New York and that gritty blue collar workman-like attitude and that ethos. Does that still exist with hardcore bands that are coming up today, or is that a long gone, past era?
I mean, we've been a band for a bit. So, coming up, we started like 2001. Yeah. I still think it's the same. Like, granted, like society's a bit different with like technology and all that stuff. Right. But I think like the true ethics of hardcore is that like working class type of band. The real down and dirty, like kind of taking the opportunities. I do think it's still out there. We're fortunate enough, we play with a bunch of younger bands and stuff, and I still see it in people, even it might have a modern spin on it where, back in the day when you're like a working band, you might have to play a Monday night at a club before somebody even knows who you are to get that Friday night spot. We're luckily with the internet and how exposed hardcore is. It's not like that. But I think the true ethic of hardcore is still there.
And what was your gateway into hardcore? Was there a particular artist or an album or a song? Like what was that entry point for you?
So when I was younger, I was into like a little bit of hip hop, a little bit of metal. And then, I can't remember if it was like the original Headbangers Ball or if it was like Beavis and Butthead, but I remember seeing like a Suicidal video. Yeah. And I was like, oh, these dudes are skating and they look like street dudes, but they're playing metal. So that like got me intrigued. And I watched the Biohazard video, and then I definitely picked up the first Biohazard album, and that definitely went a long way. And that led me down a rabbit hole, and Agnostic Front being one of my favorite bands. Once I found Agnostic Front, like I really was sucked in. And then in like 93, I went to my first show. It was Biohazard, a band from Boston called Stompbox, and another band from Boston called Reason Enough. And I had been to like a concert before, but that was the first like hardcore show, and that just had me hooked.
And had you hooked, but would you say when you were going to this hardcore show, or even leading up going to a hardcore show, that you found yourself? Because I've talked to Craig from Agnostic Front, and I think I've talked to a couple other guys too who have said that they kind of had that apprehension because hardcore shows could be so off the chain that there was a little bit of like trepidation, like in a good way, but like shit, what's gonna jump off here?
So I mean, I didn't. When I got into hardcore, I grew up like, 20 minutes outside of Boston, a little bit of a smaller town compared to Boston. There was a couple people that I was like going to school with that, like when I got into it, they kind of knew about it. So I didn't have much of a lead up of what to expect besides like that Biohazard video I saw, or
Right.
that Suicidal video. And then, like, you know, back then it's not like you're going on YouTube. So I was listening to Agnostic Front, Madball. I really didn't know what to expect, to be honest with you. And then I showed up to that club, and it was like a 500-person club opposed to an actual big concert.
Right.
And immediately I was like, okay, this is wild. Like, it had me hooked, but I could see, like, I'm like, what are these people doing as far as like the moshing? And it was a little more intense than a metal show. Plus, it's way smaller, so it's easy to get hit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't think I was like apprehensive beforehand, because I don't think I really knew what to expect.
Right.
And then when I saw it, there was something about that energy. Sure, a little bit of fear, but a little bit of like intrigued, because, you know, it was wild, but like, I didn't see anybody get hurt, but I'm like, how does this work? So it really got me, like, it almost piqued my interest so much, I just kept on going. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Now that's your foray into hardcore. But what about music in general? Like, what was your like upbringing like? Like, how early on, you know, did you know, like, geez, this might be something I want to pursue potentially, you know, for a living?
Well, I mean, I don't know if I really make a living, but so I mean, just even being younger, hardcore, when I went to the hardcore show, right? So I liked music. I was intrigued by music. You know, I was always into music. Coming up, I've said this before on podcasts, I feel like I got into music a little later. My parents were deaf, so like there wasn't music in the house.
Okay.
Because they could not hear.
Okay.
So it was more like me getting into like later in elementary and middle school and finding, you know, whatever my friends are listening to. Right. So that's just like listening. And then when I found hardcore, just because, like I said, when I was at that show, I saw the band members hanging out in the crowd and not just being on stage. And I was like, oh, so like you can interact with these people.
Right. These guys are approachable. Yeah. Right.
Right. So then I was like, okay, so now all of a sudden, like, these musicians are not like superheroes, right? Like, it's obtainable, but I still don't understand that. Like, I want to be in a band. I'm just into the music. And then it was a few years later, I was actually working at Domino's Pizza, and there was a local band called Brawl Park. They were a hardcore band. And a driver from the other Domino's in the town over stopped in to get some stuff, and he had a Brawl Park sticker. And I was like, oh, you know that band? Oh, you like that band? He was like, I played drums in that band. I was like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And then he invited me to their rehearsal studio, and it was in the next town over. So I would go to their rehearsals and hang out as a fan of the band. Right. And then I could see how the inner band workings were. So I could be like, oh, so you just get up and scream.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my gateway to like being in a band. And from there, it was a rehearsal studio. So I met other guys, and I started forming my first band.
And you know, going back a couple of years when everything kind of went off the rails there with COVID, how did that affect what you guys? Because you guys' last album came out in 2019, right? Unfinished Business came out in 2019. When 2020 hits and all this, everything hits the fan with COVID, did that derail a lot of shit for you guys, or pull the plug on a lot of plans for you guys?
Absolutely. I mean, even when we recorded that Unfinished Business, or when it came out in 2019, it had been a period before we put out a record for many reasons. But we're putting out this record, ready to hit the ground running.
Yep.
Absolutely. We had tours lined up. We were touring up to that. And then I think, you know, whatever, everything got shut down, like, let's say March 13th, 15th. We had just flown back from California. We're out on the West Coast with Madball.
Yeah.
We flew home literally March 3rd.
Yeah.
And 2 weeks later, we're supposed to go to Canada. Yeah. It completely derailed a lot of things and put things on a big pause.
And when you guys do get together as a band, you know, take me a little bit into like what the creative process is. Like, is it pretty collaborative with you guys, or does somebody kind of come in when you guys are going to go into an album cycle? Does somebody come in with like the lion's share of the ideas, or do you guys kind of work it out like very democratically?
Yeah, we're pretty democratic. I mean, it's tough to say. Like, our primary, like, quote unquote songwriter, who is still a part of the band, he doesn't really write. He had kids and stuff. He hasn't written anything since the 2009 record. So when he was in the band, he was pretty much the primary like songwriter. He would just come to practice and go, oh, I got this, and it'd be a big majority of a song, if not completely done. Right. And we all like kind of contribute. Now going forward, I feel like a lot more people have an input. Not that we didn't have an input before, but now it's a little bit more of a collaborative.
Yeah.
on Unfinished Business, Colin Riley, that was playing guitar at the time, and he had been in the band for a bit. He wrote a good portion of it, and as well as Ben, my drummer. Colin did a lot. We definitely worked together with it. And then after Unfinished Business, we just did a 7-inch earlier this year that came out a month ago. I feel like the writing process going forward, it's going to be kind of a collaborative with, like, the guitar player writing a bunch of stuff, and then my drummer's pretty good even on guitar. So, and then they'll hand me like 3/4 or something. We also will get together too. So it's not like, hey, this is how it goes. And I think that's really important, because otherwise you're going to be putting out the same record. You know what I mean? Right. I may not be able to write music, but I'll be like, hey, maybe we should try a breakdown here, or my drummer will go this and that. So it's kind of a group effort no matter what. It's not like this is how it is and that's it.
So back in July, the aforementioned, you were just talking about, you put out Master of None. And then, the flip side of that is you did a fantastic cover of Sonic Reducer. Who decides, like, obviously you guys' background, the punk hardcore, makes sense doing a cover of a Dead Boy song. But who decides that, though? Is that something where somebody suggests it?
Well, it's just funny. Like, I was like, all right, so we're going to go in and do the 7-inch. We had the new song, and for example, that song we're discussing, this circumstance, B-Roll, my guitar player, had a majority of that song already done. But anyway, so we're like, all right, for the B-side, we got to do a cover. And we're always kind of kicking around ideas. And I was just listening to a bunch of punk stuff, and I was like, you know what, man? This Sonic Reducer would sound sick if we did it, because we're just heavier.
Yeah.
And the format would work. And I just texted the band, and they were like, yep, that makes sense. So it's like one person will come up with an idea. Not always me, but whoever has it. And if it's something that clicks, we're just like, yep, no questions asked.
What about this point in your career when, obviously, the narrative in people's lives changes? Like you said, you've been doing this 20 plus years, suddenly, people have, significant others or families or sometimes, sometimes in smaller bands, you guys even have like a day job or whatever. How has the narrative changed, or how do you guys work out the itinerary, because you guys do tour so much and make it comfortable for everybody? Does everybody kind of have that luxury to be able to just kind of pull up stakes and go?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, the dynamic of the band in a band at our level, especially since Unfinished Business minus the pandemic, we've been kind of trying to ramp back up because we had a little bit of a lull.
Yeah.
So we all kind of have jobs that know we come and go. Yeah. We're in family situations where we're comfortable, but it's also a balance, right? Go out for 2 to 3 weeks, come home for a month, 5 or 6 shows. So it's a balance. We used to, there's a period we were doing like 250 shows a year.
Yeah.
And I don't even think I could do that. But also a band at our level, it's like we do all right. But to make that work financially, you just got to always be on the road, and it takes a toll on you. So it's really just balance. Stay active, do things that make sense, be proactive, but also, like, if somebody's like, hey, this is really important, I need to be home for this, then we might have to skip it unless it's something that you can't turn down. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. And as you get older in the business, and, I know this is certainly applicable to me, and I notice it, and I'm not somebody that's a musician or out on the road or getting up and playing a physical style of music like you do. But do you notice from a physical standpoint that anything has changed, or any kind of preparations that you got to do before you get on stage? Is it a couple more Tylenol, a little more stretching? Like what does that change at all?
I don't think well, for me, I'm a guy that's got to have like a few beers and then go up there and do my thing, get a little bit. The Tylenol is definitely in the morning. And staying up till like 4 and 5 in the morning, just wilding out, just doesn't really work, or I'll be dead. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I'll be 45 this year, doing the band a long time. For some reason, like whenever we're about to go on stage, whether it's a small show, a huge show, it still hits me. And I guess that's what drives this band, right? So it's like, the financials aren't why we do it. We do it for the love of it. So you still feel it. It's weird, because you would think, like, I will say, like, half an hour before set, I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing? Yeah. And then you're about to go on stage and that adrenaline kicks in and you just go. In the morning, couple Motrins, whatever. But just try to get your sleep in. You know what I mean? Like, we're not 20 years old. We can't just be partying all the time. Right. Not they were a big party band, but you know what I mean? Like, oh, let's hang out. Let's do this. Yeah. Oh, we got friends in Germany. Let's stay out all night. That gets tougher. But other than that, you know, I mean, I'm not a big exercise guy. I mean, I have a physical job, and then the band's physical, but I try to stay like, you know, eat as healthy as I can. And
are you a guy that ascribes to any kind of a, you know, I don't know, like a lot of guys are just gifted with that ability to, like, you know, jump up on the stage, grab the mic, and start screaming. Are you a guy with any kind of voice care or any kind of a routine for your voice? Or are you just a guy that can do that? You can just jump up there and start belting it out?
I'm a lucky one, because people say that all the time. They're like, how do you keep it? And I have a pretty heavy voice, and I used to do 250 shows a year. I'm lucky. I have no like pre-show ritual besides a couple of beers.
Yeah.
I'm a smoker, so that can't help.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't do any warm-ups. You know, I think when we were doing those 250 shows a year, and even leading up to that, you know, when the band first started, we used to practice all the time. I think I just lucked out and have a certain voice and learned how to sing properly.
Yeah.
But I can just go out there and do my thing. Like, people are like, oh, what's your recipe? And I'm like, a couple beers and a cigarette. I don't know.
No one's gonna catch you. No one's gonna catch you backstage like do ra mi fa.
I know a lot of people that do it, and I think that makes total sense, like warming it up. You know what I mean? But I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like with a deeper voice or something like that. Yeah, I've been very fortunate that I don't really have to do much.
Obviously, hardcore music or just heavy metal and extreme music in general is certainly an acquired taste. You know, was there something in your upbringing that you felt kind of drew you to it? Like, did you like, were you particularly like an aggressive kid or anything like that? Like, what kind of led you to, you know, because I'm always intrigued by how people come to like metal, you know, because obviously, you know, it's not something that appeals to everybody.
For sure.
You know?
For sure.
I turn some of my music on and my wife gets a 30-second taste of it, and she's like, "What the hell?"
Right. Yeah. When I was younger, I was definitely a little more aggressive. You know, I had school problems, getting into fights, like dumb kids. You know, I was into skateboarding. I remember, like I said, I was first into hip hop, and then I heard Slayer, and I was like, "Damn, this is crazy."
They were the gateway.
They were like the first, like, before I got into like the underground stuff. Slayer was the band being like, damn, okay, Sell to Heaven, yeah, all right. And you know, I guess being a fucked up kid, I don't know if I can swear on this, but a messed up kid.
Sure, absolutely.
Being aggressive, and you hear the heavy music, and then you read the lyrics. And granted, like, hardcore is a little more personal, but like even Slayer, you're just like, dude, what is this guy talking about? So it could relate to me. You know what I mean? I like that aggression in music once I heard it. You know what I mean? So like, you know, once I heard Slayer and then Metallica, and I'm not like a super metal guy, so I'm not like this, like, no, the first two Metallicas, like, I just liked anything that had like aggression and sounded angry. And it had to be my upbringing, you know, like I was like a punk kid, like getting in trouble. Not going home when I was supposed to, like skateboarding, but in the early 90s was like a no. I did that. I skipped school. Definitely got my fair share of fights as a kid. So yeah, it's definitely the aggression. And then even leading up to that first show, as much as it made me nervous, the first hardcore show, that like control, I call it a controlled aggression in a way. I was just like, this is crazy. Like, this looks like a release to me. So, like, before I even wanted to be in a band, the energy of the crowd was what appealed me before. I was like, I can do this. I was just like, I want to be a part of this. It's like, to me, it was cool. Like, people stage diving, people are moshing, kicking, running around circles. I don't know what, I'm like, this is wild. And that definitely drew me in a hardcore. Like, so the aggressive music for sure was the anger, but then when I got into hardcore, I still had a little bit of edge to me, and I was like, that was like my release. You know what I mean? You go to show, mosh, wild out, stage dive, then you go home and you're like, yeah, whatever, things are good. So it's like a therapy.
Are there any frontmen? Hard. I'm speaking specifically about punk hardcore frontmen here. Who you kind of I hate, you've been doing it for so long. I hate to use the word influence because it's so overused. But are there any guys that you emulate or you look at like, wow, like that's a template for like a great hardcore frontman?
For sure. I mean, Agnostic Front being one of my favorite bands of all times. Like,
me too.
And when I first got an Agnostic Front, I don't think they were actually playing at the time. I think Roger might have been away. But the first time I saw them, and I don't think I I perform like, but like watching Agnostic Front and watching Roger, I was like,
incredible.
That's a good frontman. And then Freddie from Madball's for sure one of the best I've ever seen. And even to this day, like Scott from Terror, I don't know that I emulate, but I look at these people and I for sure look up to them. You know what I mean? You try to always do like your own thing, but growing up, like to me, Roger's very unique on stage, but just how he controls that was sick. Like I was like, this dude's crazy.
Yeah. And I've said it before on here too, like what Roger's been through, like recently with his health issues and stuff. Yeah. And I just saw them last year, and I mean, he still gets up there and will put guys half his age to shame. I mean, with the energy that they put, they
crazy.
Out. Yeah,
it's crazy. Yeah, no, we were just in Europe. I did a lot of touring with. I was fortunate to a lot of touring with Agnostic Front, but yeah, I hadn't seen him in a minute, and I know he went through all the health stuff, and we just played a couple festivals in Europe, and they had to go on late. They were on like they closed out the second stage at like 1:30 in the morning. Yeah. And he just went out there and destroyed. And he's just one of those guys. You know, everything he's been through, he just leaves it all on the stage, and that's what I mean. It's the whole persona of him. It's not really like just the moves or the saying. It's like everything, you know.
Right. And then you see a guy like Vinny Stigma who just seems to be like ageless. I mean,
I remember being at his like 51st birthday on tour in Germany, and to me that was 20 years ago. It wasn't, but in my head I'm like, that's forever ago.
Close to it though. Close to it.
Oh, he's getting up there, and he goes out there every night. And, you know, this goes back to like you talk about Motrins. I'm like, dude, how are you still doing it? And he's not even just doing it; he's enjoying it.
Oh yeah,
like, I watch that guy play, and I'm like, he's having a blast.
Yeah,
I think that's the coolest thing. Like, you know. I know there's metal dudes doing out there, but like, you know, hardcore can be taxing because even the biggest of the bands don't get to travel. And I mean, within hardcore, don't get to travel like the biggest of the metal bands. Right. You know, this is $1, and this is not hating on it. So like, you know, when we're doing this festival tour and you see AF in a van just like us, you know what I mean? And that's not good on your body, and they're getting up. So, but yeah, I mean, Stigma's, it's insane what he's doing at his age. You know, he's still jumping out there, letting people circle pit around him. I'm always like, be careful of him, but he don't care.
And now you talk about the festival circuit. You know, I recently had a couple weeks ago, I had Craig on here and from Agnostic Front, and he had put some stuff up on his Facebook page, you know, and they had quite a little anthemic chant going, and this was on a European stage at a festival, you know, but you know, you can kind of see though, or it almost feels like hardcore bands look strange on that festival stage. You know, do you like the smaller intimate stages, or do you like playing to when it's just like a sea of people like that?
Okay, so I feel like it gives you two different feelings, right? So nothing will beat the intimacy of a small show, right? But when you're playing like, because bands like us don't always get opportunities to play big concerts or festivals, right? Europe, because we've been there so many times, and the European market, the States is getting better, but the European market allows us to go on a stage where, you know, Motorhead could be, you know, no longer is Motorhead with us, but at one point I played the same stage. Motorhead played 4 bands later. That would not happen on the stage. So the other so you have the small club show, and you have that, like, you know what you get from that, right? That energy, that pop.
Sure.
I feel like when we walk on a festival stage, it gives me it turns on a different switch, right? I still get an energy, but I see like almost like an opportunity. I have more, like, there's more people, and I don't know if they're all hardcore people. So now I have an opportunity to reach more people with my music. So it pushes me, and it gives me a different feeling. So I don't compare the two. They both give me a great feeling, but it's two different things. You know,
also seems like it's a nice chance to win some potential fans over, though, 100%.
I think it's, and that's very important, especially with bands like us that have been doing for a minute. You get to play in front of a sea of people, and like you said, hopefully win some people over. And I've seen that happen. Europe especially. I feel like in Europe, there's just a different culture with music and arts and stuff like that. Where we played festivals, and then you see, you know, all of a sudden we're playing a club show. You're like, who are these three big like thrash dudes? And they're like, I saw you at this festival, and they come support your band and have a good time, you know.
And I'm sure you probably being a band that plays a lot of club gigs, I'm sure you've probably been in this situation though. How do you gear yourself up from a mental standpoint, because a hardcore experience is so ferocious? And, you know, maybe it's been a long time since you've had this experience, but I always like to get the mindset though. But, you know, when you go out there and you see that you're just playing for the 5 or 6 drunk guys out there, you gotta, what's that experience like? And how do you gear yourself up for a show like that?
It happens the best with, yeah. So, you know, like I said, so a lot of times when I'm about to go on stage, I get that energy, right? When the first note hits, I truly love the band. Like me listening to my own band and screaming my lyrics, that's what gets me excited. So like when I see 5 or 6 people, that makes me want to play even harder, right?
Okay.
It's not the easiest, don't get me wrong, because you're just this is going to be a bad night. But once that first note hits, it's just like even when we're at practice, man, we're going to run around, have a good time. And these people still paid their money. These people are still here for the show.
Right.
Yeah, it's sure. I'm sure myself, the people there, the promoter, we'd all like another 200 people. So I just feel like you got to go up there and do it. And I guess what drives me is the music. The music still hits me. You know what I mean? Like we hit that first note, we go in there. And sometimes I just don't overthink the crowd. Like I don't go, oh man, where is everybody? I just go out there and play. You know what I mean? And more so anything, those 6 people are going to have the most intimate experience. And I want them to walk away and be like, man, you guys played like there was 500 people.
Yeah.
But they paid the same amount if there was 500 people.
Yeah.
So like I said, beforehand, it's taxing because you're like, last time I played here, there was 100 people. Why is there 10 people here?
Right. Right.
You never know. So you just go out there and do it. And like I said, the music, this goes back to like me still loving our music. Even though I'm playing a certain song that I've been playing for 20 years, when we go out there, the loud noise of the amps, the you know, the monitors, the kick drum, it just gives me that energy. And I think, you know, I've never been in any metal band, so I don't know if there is a difference from like a performing metal band, even though there's a lot of energy there. I just know that this goes back to like, even as a kid watching a crowd, there is a lot of energy in hardcore because I'm not a true musician. So I just love the feel of that. Like I'm not a guy that wears earplugs, and I know it's probably a bad thing, but I love the raw guitar in my ear and the kick and the snare. And then that gives me that energy, you know?
And you know, since the music business has changed so much with these platforms, you know, and everything's changed the way we consume music and how we consume music. You know, do you guys collectively as a band, you know, have a formula in your mind when you're going to put out new music? Like you just put out the 7-inch or whatever, but you know, do you guys have a stance on like, you know, doing full albums as opposed to EPs, as opposed to singles? Like, what's the right approach right now for you guys?
I think, you know, even Unfinished Business is only like 8 songs. Yeah. I mean, it's not short. I do think even since the beginning of that, the beginning of the writing process for that, I do think that people's attention span is way shorter.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's why I ask. Yeah.
So, you know, like I was just saying with like the energy, I do think people that love hardcore. And I do think there's a lot of people that listen to hardcore that appreciate full albums. Yeah. I do think a lot of the younger kids, and I could have even been like this when I was younger. You know, a lot of them there for the live show. They love a band. They'll pick up a record. I don't know if their attention span gets past 4 or 5 songs. Right. And I don't want to speak for them. So I do think that, like, all right, so the 7-inch was more so, all right, we put out a record in 2019. It ruined our touring cycle. We're about to go, you know, after the pandemic, we've been touring like crazy. Now we're like, the pandemic gave you an excuse, but I'm like, well, now it's been like 4 years. So we just did that real quick because we were going to Europe and wanted to stay consistent with something new. Yeah. We actually plan on recording a record. I don't know what, you know, it may just be an EP at the end of the year. But I do think the way people consume stuff, like you see a lot of people dropping more singles and EPs than full lengths, especially in hardcore. And I think, you know, you got to figure too, like in hardcore, even back in the day, the budgets are always smaller. Even if you're on a bigger label, even if you're on a quasi-major, like major independent, the budget for hardcore has always been smaller. So it's even more smaller now with the industry kind of upside down.
If you're even fortunate enough to be on a label. I mean, some bands aren't. You guys are still on Bridge 9, correct?
Yeah, we're still on Bridge 9. So, you know, even them, like, they had to, you know, shorten up like what they were doing compared to before. They don't release as much stuff. So, but on the other end too, there's an aspect of a lot of these younger kids that there's more access to, like, you can record a record yourself. Now, is it going to sound the same as if Zeus does it? You know, that's up for debate.
Right.
So now you can kind of just like go in a basement with Pro Tools and a laptop and not have a horrible recording.
Right.
So, you know, there's different mindsets. And I think with that, you see a lot of hardcore bands or the smaller up and coming bands too, just doing EPs or split 7-inches. I think us going forward, you know, right, we're kind of debating. We're like in between. So it's like an inner band argument. Like, do we have the songs? Right. It's just a matter of like, you know, we like to get a good recording. So we're trying to figure out like the financials and the time frame, or do we split it up over 2 EPs, but like not wait 4 years for another one, you know? Right. So I think like the mindset of, you know, if you do less, put it out more frequently. That makes sense.
Is there a pressure, like, because you put out the last album in 2019 and because there is such an influx of music, you know, as you said, people are just able to make songs on their computer. So someone gave me the statistic the other day that these streaming platforms are getting 60,000 new songs a day, you know what I mean? So is there like a pressure, you know, to keep your name out there, to keep it relevant? Do you have any concern, you know, that you know, that it's been, you know, 4 years since the last album? You know, is that the impetus for putting out the 7-inch?
Absolutely. Yeah, because like I said, you could halt the 2-3 years of the pandemic. Yeah, use that as an excuse for a bit, but then you're back on the road, and then you're like, well,
right, we got nothing new here.
Yeah. So, and like you said, there is a lot of people putting out music, and all our intentions with Unfinished Business started happening obviously after the pandemic. So we were like all of a sudden touring a whole bunch. Right. And then we're like, all right, we're going back to Europe for the second or third time off this. We're like, yeah, we should put out a 7-inch because just to have something out there. We probably would have done a whole EP if we had more time, but we didn't. Right. But yes, it's absolutely like keep ourselves current, because part of that is playing a lot, right? Getting out there and playing is keep you current. But if you don't have any new music, while other bands are dropping new music all the time, I think it's absolutely important.
And it seems like a tough time. You know, I talked to a lot of musicians on here. You know, it does seem obviously the industry has made it now, so it's very feast or famine. Bands are really out there slogging on the road, hoping they can sell a few more T-shirts. As far as is the lineup you guys have right now, you know, does anybody get disenfranchised? Is it tough to keep the morale up? You know, does everybody feel like they're all kind of rowing in the same direction, so to speak, and everybody's still, you know, invested in the band?
I'd like to think so. I mean, this lineup we have right now is really solid. And we communicate a lot. My drummer's been with me over 10 years. The guitar player that's playing with us was in the band from 2006 to 2011, left for a bit, came back. Yeah. So I feel like, but everybody in the band has kind of seen like the good and the bad. Right. And things, you know, I want to knock on wood. Shows have been really good, even if the smalls are small. So like, I think the most important thing is to stay grounded. This isn't like the mid 2000s when you can put your hopes so high because you see all these possibilities, right? And things are still possible. But I think after a while, like when you're a band that's been around for a long time, you just kind of know how it goes. Like when you're on a good up, that's good. And it's probably going to come down. So I feel like we're all kind of grounded. We take every show for what it is, right? Yeah. Say it's a bad turnout. Well, we sounded good. Right. It's a great turnout, you know, whatever the case is. And I think that's really important. And we've been pretty fortunate lately. Things have been good. So hopefully it just stays on that. But I think we all, you know, as well as other members in the band, they've been in other bands too that are smaller and, you know, so you kind of see all aspects of hardcore, and it's like, yeah, things may not be perfect, but the fact that we're still able to go out there and play and people still come see my band after all these years, or our band, I should say, or, you know, even with the different lineups, like, okay, we put out this record and it still gets received in a good way. Like it's all fulfilling, and we go out there and play and we all get along. And it's, like I said, we just make the best of everything. And you have to, if you have too high of goals, then you're going to get, you know, then you're going to get crushed. Yeah. If you have too low expectations, you're not going to work hard. I think we're just a band that like kind of understands, like, you know, for being a band for 20 years and being like workhorses, kind of, you know what I mean? Like you said, the hardcore, like the blue collar working class type band. Yeah. You kind of just take the good and the bad, man, and try to make the best of it.
And are you somebody, you know, because of that influx of music, you know, I'm trying to be better about this. I'm kind of one of those guys like stuck in a time warp. And the podcast has really helped me to try to give younger bands a platform. You know, you can't always get, you know, legendary artists on here or people that have been doing it a long time. So I've gotten a lot of younger bands on here. But when you have time to listen as a fan, are you somebody that leans heavy on old favorites, or are you somebody that gets to explore a lot of new music?
I spend a bunch of time driving during the day. So I kind of like, I go through my days. So like some days you play like this stuff you love, right?
Yeah.
But I definitely try to, I take a lot of time and like you said, it's easy to be like, this is what I like, but and how the podcast helps you. Us still being out there touring, you know, having to do headlining shows, like, and taking younger bands and seeing what younger bands. So I still go out to shows as much as I can. Cause I live really close to the city where they do a bunch of hardcore shows. And that's the same with music. So, you know, even sometimes like, you know, sometimes I listen to just regular classic rock and just relax, you know, I'm not just hardcore, but yeah, I do think it's important with the network of people I see. When somebody drops a new release, I'll definitely try to check out a little bit. To stay kind of current with what's going on. And I think it's important, especially in this type of industry, like, you know, for a band like us to go out and headline, you got to make sure the support bands are like up and coming bands. You can't just do the same regurgitated thing. And hardcore has such a big turnaround ratio. So like if a band was really good a year ago, they could have broken up because not everybody sticks around, right?
Might not even be around anymore.
or the band from a year ago could have had the biggest pop, and if I put them on before us, they're going to blow us out the water. And that's a good thing. So yeah, I try to listen a little bit of everything. You know, I stay current on my socials and stuff just to know and go to shows. Or if I still think, you know, once again, for me, hardcore's always been the live experience. So that's why it's
absolutely.
You know, it's tough getting out all the time, especially when you're playing shows. You know what I mean? It's like we just did a weekend, and I gotta go to a show Friday. I'm going to Metal Fest on Saturday. You know, I'm like, there's a show Sunday. I'm like, but I can pick and choose. But even aside from like the bigger shows, like, you know, there's a lot of local up and coming bands. So when they're playing Tuesday night upstairs Middle East with a bunch of other, when I say locals, like regional touring stuff, it's good to check out because I'm like, oh, there's 100 kids here on a Tuesday night with no like big headliner. Like, that band's doing well. Hey, what are you guys doing? We're going out on a weekend. Like, come hang out. You know what I mean? I'm into your band. So that's, I try to stay relevant.
And when you see these younger bands too, you know, and you've been in the industry doing it for so long, you know, does it drive you guys even a little bit to see these bands kind of nipping at your heels, so to speak, you know?
100%. I mean, yeah, I think like a good, you know, when you see a great band go out there and do their thing. Definitely pushes you, right? Like, and it's like, it, you know, I'm sure this, I don't know if it's competition, but once again, it goes back to the hardcore and the energy. And it's like, man, these kids are out there running around. We're going to show we can run around too. You know what I mean? And I think that gives every paying person the experience of the show, you know, like Madball's been doing it longer than us. And it's like, we play, and then I see Madball play, and I'm like, damn.
Freddie's a ball of energy.
They're running circles around. You know what I'm saying? So it's like then the next day, I'm like, we got to keep that energy up.
Freddie never stops moving.
And I think at the end of the day, everybody that came and paid X amount of dollars was like, man, I got an energy full show from everybody. So yeah, I think it all goes hand in hand. Like, you know, hardcore's that one music, and not the only one. You know, punks like that, even thrash, but it is the one music where it's like, okay, you hope the crowd helps give you energy, but you also got to, like, this goes back to like, if there's nobody there, the energy of my own band gives me energy, you know, and just being like, these people, you know, hardcore is very energy driven. Even if you're watching a band, you don't want to see them just sitting there. You know what I mean? So it's like, you got to keep that energy going. So for sure.
It's not a guy sitting around on a stool playing an acoustic guitar. That's for sure.
And I like that.
It has its place.
Enjoy that stuff here and there.
But
hardcore is very energy, whether it's crowd has no energy, well, we need energy, or crowd has energy. Now we have even more energy. You know, the next band after us has got to get, you know, so that's for sure what it is.
Now, these last two questions, you know, possibly could be a little polarizing, but we'll try to get through them anyway. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but your hardcore Mount Rushmore, who are they?
What's Mount Rushmore? Four, right?
Well, hold on. I lost your. There you go.
All right, we're back.
Four. Yep.
Top four bands. Agnostic Front.
Yeah.
Madball, Terror, and Death Threat.
Well, you answered that very definitively too. There was no hesitation there at all.
dude, sometimes I have those weird thoughts in my head too. Like, I don't know.
Who am I going to alienate here, right?
Yeah, and I could swap 4 for ringworm. I don't know. I could go down a rabbit hole, but I know Agnostic Front, Madball, Terror for sure.
Well, and I think a lot of it's generational because I've had Paul Bearer on here, and well, he goes back a little, like he'll put out bands like Poison Idea and stuff like that, bands that go back to his generation. So it's all very subjective, obviously.
Absolutely, and AF's one that crosses a bunch of generations. Madball as well, Terror. I mean, they've been doing it 20 plus years, but and then Death Threat's been that's what I'm going to go with. I'll stick with that.
And if I'm dropping Bryan Harris on a desert island, what's the desert island album? You can only take one.
All right, so this is where it gets weird. Are we going? We got to take a hardcore album.
You can take any album. You're going to die on an album. You're going to die on an island with this goddamn album.
I mean, I would take Bob Seger's greatest hits, but let's play hardcore because it makes sense. Okay. I'm gonna go Agnostic Front, One Voice.
Okay. And why that album particularly? Why that album? I mean, defend that album as to why that would be the Agnostic Front, where a lot of people might say Victim in Pain, or
sure. And Agnostic Front has that catalog of records that kind of they're all hardcore, but they all have a tinge. So when I got into hardcore, or what I thought was hardcore, I was suicidal. Then I bought a Biohazard record. The record available to me was Agnostic Front, One Voice, and I think after revisiting everything with Agnostic Front and realizing from the 80s and the sound of the first few records, it's definitely got a little more of a metal feel, and I feel like that's a little modern to what I was into at the time. But that record specifically, I was like, I bought it and I never stopped listening to it, and I think all the songs are phenomenal. And then to find out years later, like Roger wrote a lot of those lyrics when he was locked up, then I was like, oh man, that makes sense. This makes sense. This makes sense. I don't know, man. There's not a bad song on it, and I love that record front to back. And it's for sure a time and a place. I got it, and there's plenty of other records that I love from them. That's my go-to.
There's a nostalgia factor there.
100. Nostalgia. It spoke to me when I was a kid, and like listening to it on my Discman for whatever, resonated. Same thing Roger going through, but just being an angry person, being like, I can relate to this. And then the sound of it, where I want to say metal, but it's not like it's just a heavy hardcore record. You know what I mean?
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you. Listen, Bryan, man, this has been a blast. I'm glad we finally got a chance to do this, man. Absolutely. And I hope you'll keep in touch and we can do it again sometime down the road, man.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it. I know we were going back and forth, brother.
Listen, I do that with so many guests. I always tell people that I always have to cultivate these interviews. I get it. People have lives. You know how much, in my Facebook Messenger thing, I'm going back and forth sometimes with 30, 40 different people, trying to cultivate interviews and stuff. And, I got a full-time job in healthcare and 6 grandkids. And, this is like a side hustle.
You're busy too.
Yeah, I'm busy too. Absolutely. Yeah. But I appreciate you doing it, man. Thank you so much, brother. Man. It's been really fun talking to you, man.
Thank you.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it.
Peace.
Later. And there he goes, folks. That is Bryan Harris, vocalist for one of the greats in the punk hardcore world. Death Before Dishonor, Boston beatdown fucking hardcore, the way it fucking should be, man. The last album was 2019's Unfinished Business, but the good news is, a couple months ago, they just put out a 7-inch, as you heard. The single is called Master of None. It is a fucking ripper. And the flip side of that, they did a phenomenal cover of the Dead Boys tune, Sonic Reducer. Do go check that out. And as you heard, the boys are hopefully going to be putting some new music together very soon. Fingers crossed, man, that all that goes well, man. That was a real pleasure, man. Been cultivating that one for a while, going back and forth with Bryan. Kind enough of him to come on here and do it, man. That was a real pleasure getting a chance to chop it up with him. I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. And remember, kids, until we get together and we do this thing again, and we will do it again soon, please remember to take it easy and keep it sleazy.